family history in that my mom and dad, when my father was born in Harlem in 1920.
Okay.
John Whitfield Sr. My mom, Mamie Whitfield, was born on a farm outside of Parhamville, Virginia. I think I got that right. In 1923.
Yeah,
Right. But she'll always say she grew up in Baltimore.
That's right. That's right.
And Grandpa's, early life was sort of unceremonious. My grandfather passed when Dad was 2. They were living in Chicago for a short period of time, and this was 1922. This was, they talk about the Depression not starting for a few years later, but the Depression was already in. Trust me.
Okay.
And so they lived in Chicago, and I feel like Dad told me that Grandpa had a job. I want to say washing cars, but that doesn't make any sense in 1922.
Yeah,
but,
that wouldn't have been a job back then.
Right, like doing something, Model Ts, I guess. But, but how many were there? Like, you got to get a job at a car wash. Right?
Yeah.
So, but he had a job anyway, and he contracted a terrible flu.
Okay.
And it killed, and he died.
Oh, well,
right.
Yeah,
And so,
then,
right. So they moved. So Grandma moved Dad and Aunt Mildred back to Harlem.
Okay.
And they lived not too far from the Apollo Theater. So now Dad, he looked so much like Billy Eckstine that when I was at the Vanguard with Roy and Joey DeFrancesco and Chris Holliday shooting the Young, Gifted, and Cool thing for the New York Times in 1990, I walked in and Christopher Holliday walked up and said, "Mr. Eckstine, it's such a pleasure to meet you." And my dad was like, "Where's Billy?" Where's Billy? He's like, "Fool, it's me, Mark Stan." He's like, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Whitfield." You know what I mean? Like, but my dad, he loved jazz. He was a bebopper.
Okay.
And so he had aspirations of becoming a jazz singer. And at the time, before he met Grandma, he was dating a girl who and they sang together, and they would go to they were there when Ella Fitzgerald won Amateur Night at the Apollo, and so they would go to the Apollo every Wednesday night, whatever it was for Amateur Night, and they got the courage to get up and sing, and so but not together, she would go for so my dad being a gentleman, you can go first. Right.
Yeah, that's a setup.
Right. She got up there, and you know how the Apollo's it's just so unforgiving and relentless. Poor girl, apparently she cracked the first note and they booed.
Sandman came out.
Before the Sandman could get her to the side of the stage, Grandpa was already back in his living room. He already left?
Oh, shit.
He was out of there. Yeah, so much for chivalry. He was gone. Right? Not even, "Oh, it's okay, baby. We get him better next week." He's like, "I'm out." Right?
All right, Grandpa.
But he never abandoned his love of music and all that. And so I have, vague memories of being a little kid, hearing him walk around the house, which is why I used to smile when you would do it so much. He'd be walking around whistling Ornithology.
Oh, really?
Like little bebop things. I hadn't even heard that music yet. And Mom, her entire childhood is a huge exercise in contradiction. Mm. For instance, her grandfather was born a slave. He was manservant to a Confederate general. Mm-hmm. The general died in the Civil War. Mm-hmm. Her grandfather inherited all the property. Yep. So they went from being slaves to landowners overnight. Yep. So this was on the side of rough, right? That was that part, the rough part of the family. So they had the rough school, the rough general store, the rough, the entire town, the entire county was all rough. So we all her. Right. It was like going to a place where everybody looked like me. It's kind of weird, So she learned to read and write in Latin in the 8th grade. Like, she had this wonderfully modern and thorough education. Yet some of her older brothers, they made their fortune as liquor runners and as bootleggers, and they worked for Madam Queen. So that movie American Gangster, where they show Bumpy Johnson, who Denzel's character worked for, right? Part of that story where somebody would come up from the South to bring their family. That's Grandma's story. Oh, wow. So Uncle Aaron and Uncle Waverly, they
I'm learning something.
Right? They own like 8 or 9 bars in Harlem.
Okay.
And they sent for the entire family because at that point they'd shut the farm down and moved to Baltimore, which is why Grandma was talking about, I'm from Baltimore, because that's the city, right? She
Got
she
it.
would be from the
She's
farm.
not from the farm.
So
Man.
the entire family, all the Ruffs, moved up to Harlem because Aaron and Waverly were balling working for Madam Queen,
Fair enough.
right? And she was, I believe the story is she was on the subway or catching the bus going to school and met my dad.
Oh.
Because he was 3 years old.
Right, he's a couple years older.
Yeah,
Of course.
she met him, and he was
And voila.
had his Mr. B collar on and his deep voice, and he had recovered from abandoning his girlfriend at the Apollo.
Yeah, exactly. And run
He
away.
had his mojo
He was
back.
hide from her, by the way, on
Hiding
the
from
subway.
him, for sure, hiding from her, exactly. Yeah, the hat pulled down low, and that's how the Whitfield family was born.
And so you have, I mean, obviously, I know this, but
So,
you have brothers and sisters.
So my three older brothers, John, David, and Roger, were born in 1940, 1943, and 1944, and then my sister Faye was born in 1950.
And I asked that because Uncle David is the one who gave you your first guitar, correct?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Mom played some organ, like church organ,
Right, okay.
right? And between the two of them, there was always music around. They were very musically conscious, and I didn't realize that. For instance, one of their best friends was Buck Clayton. Like I had no idea when like they wanted me to have a serious love for music. Like there was a jazz series at the public library where I grew up on Long Island, Lyndhurst. I got to see people like Chris Woods playing one, like kind of like not necessarily obscure, but certainly less than mainstream, but still legendary. I got to see these people when I was a kid, like in this sort of a context, playing in a public library. I got to see the Count Basie Band, the Ellington Orchestra as a little kid. I got to see Ella Fitzgerald sing, and Oscar Peterson with his trio with Joe Pass, all in a place called the Westbury Music Fair, Westbury Music Hall.
Okay. That was where? Where was that?
That was in Westbury on Long Island.
On Long Island. Okay.
Yeah, just on the border between Nassau and Suffolk County. This was I was between the ages of 7 and 12. I could see all this music.
Okay.
So they wanted to make sure that I appreciated music, but from the standpoint of having a well-rounded education. So no one in the family had aspirations of becoming a musician, and they certainly didn't want that for me. Oh. They wanted, I was good in school, and my brothers had and my sister had success in life. And they wanted me to pursue a bona fide professional career. And so I was on track to go to medical school. I had a scholarship to go to Georgetown. And I was but working against that from the entire time, all three of my brothers served in Vietnam. They had all enlisted because Uncle John enlisted because he wanted to get away from mom and dad. He sprang out on his own. And David and Roger would be like their big brothers, so they all joined the Air Force.
Okay.
And in the Vietnam War, they were already servicemen.
Right there, yeah.
So when they came home, thank God they all came home. David had spent some time, maybe 6 months or a year or so, in Florida, stationed in Florida, and he developed this amazing affinity for the blues, which is so David, right? Like sitting around drinking whiskey and listening to the blues. Right, yeah, right, exactly. He would tell stories about how he went to there was some club he used to go to in Florida, and he actually got to see Ike Turner with Tina Turner singing with him, and Jimi Hendrix was playing rhythm guitar. Like David saw them. Right. So anyway, and David, out of my brothers, he was my hero. He was strong and upright, and did karate. He was a cop like Dad. And I wanted to grow up and be big and strong like David. Right. So for my seventh birthday, so Faye, when they came home from Vietnam, Faye, our sister, gave him a guitar.
Okay.
He didn't know which way. He was like, I don't want to do this. But my seventh birthday was coming up. He gave it to me.
Okay.
So he gave me the guitar and his prized possession, which was Lightning Hopkins' anthology of the blues. He's like, little brother, this is a guitar, and this is how it's supposed to sound.
Oh,
I was
my
like, okay,
God.
David, that's what I'm going to do. Here I am,
Oh,
little kid,
there
right? Suburban kid on Long Island, playing the blues on the acoustic guitar, trying to find a bottleneck slide. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, it was so silly. But I seemed to have like an affinity for it.
Okay. And some talent, obviously.
Right. I was like, okay, I can get to it. So Grandma was like, great, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take you to a music store, get you some music lessons, some guitar lessons. So it took me to, I think the place was called Piano Plus.
And this was in Long Island.
In Lindenhurst, yeah.
Okay.
I want to say on Wellwood Avenue.
Okay.
And like that means anything. And I started taking guitar lessons there, and I hated it
Okay.
because, as you well know, I hate anything that has to do with structure.
Of course.
I'm an anarchist to the core, and I was a quick study.
Right.
So I would memorize. You know, you got all that from and beyond. Like see something, memorize it real quick, and then and go back to fooling around.
Of course. Yeah.
So I managed to quit playing guitar because Grandma used to do things like she had bought. But the teacher said the lessons cost whatever they cost. I can't remember. But to get he needs to practice 30 minutes a day. Yeah. So you know how your grandmother was. She said, okay, well, she bought an egg timer, and she would set it to 30 minutes.
Wait, now what is an egg timer? Because I don't even know.
So basically, just imagine this has got a little dial with 0 to 60, and she would turn it to 30. It would go click, click.
Oh,
click,
for
click,
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Click.
Oh Lord.
Click,
okay.
Click. And it was just loud enough because we had a 2-story house. Uh-huh. She would be in the kitchen or whatever she was doing, and she could hear me practicing, and she could hear the timer. And so she would just if I stopped practicing, she'd wait for a few seconds, and then she realized, she's like, okay, no, he's not practicing. 30 minutes is not up yet, Mark. Sorry, Mom. And I was trying to speed the thing up, but you could hear it okay, click, 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 click. He stopped playing with the timer. And my friends would be out playing basketball and all. I wanted to go out. And I was a horrible basketball player, but I wanted to play.
I want to go play.
Yeah, I want to go play. Get out there, And so I managed to quit. But I was playing the acoustic bass in the school orchestra, and I was very good at that.
And this was at the same time?
At the same time.
Okay.
And I played the alto saxophone in the school band.
Okay. Also at the same time?
At the same time.
Okay.
And I let the saxophone go by. That stopped playing the saxophone, but I kept playing the bass. And I got first year in orchestra. I went to the all-state orchestra and whatever,
Okay.
And then then I saw George Benson on television.
And George Benson was playing
with his band and the Boston Pops. The music from Breezin'. This is 1977, and I saw a PBS special.
His hit record.
Playing Breezin', yeah, playing This Masquerade and all that. And I remember sitting there, in front of the TV like this. Look, do y'all see this? Does anybody see? And so I got my guitar out, and fortunately, my teacher, God bless his soul, Frank Cordero, and then the guy that you met, which was Vinny Nazaro. Mm-hmm. God bless those guys, man. They had written all that stuff in manuscript books for me.
Wow.
So I had this huge box full of scales and arpeggios and chords, and it was all very basic information, but that was how I began to play. Because all of a sudden, after seeing that video, and having played music in an advanced, I got into the chamber ensemble at school, and I was starting to develop an advanced affinity for listening to music, and it wasn't just noise, it wasn't just notes on a page. It was starting to take shape in my imagination's ear. Cool. So now we're digging through this box, got all this information out, and now it had gone just the other way. Now they would have to come in and say, okay, you got to go to bed, stop playing. We have to go to bed, stop playing. No more playing. And so I found interesting ways to sneak in extra practice time. So oddly enough, I could after dinner, watch TV or whatever. Be sitting in my room watching TV, but this is the '70s, and so
everybody's watching one TV,
right? Or just one station, right? But the real thing about it was TV commercials had songs.
Oh, true. Okay.
Yeah. Right. All the commercials had real songs. It were jingles. It was real. Right. I learned them all. I used to practice watching television. So I was developing my technique and the ability to play without
ear training.
Right. Exactly. All that. I had no idea. Once again, a happy accident.